There is this case, this Virginia Beach case that was just so egregious to me. This from the AP. Official police use fake DNA reports during interrogations. And so what happened here, Pat, is you got two stinky, smelly cops in a room with you for 10 hours. And after 10 hours, they come in after accusing you of committing the murder, and they slam down a piece of paper in front of you and they say, you deny it, you deny it, you deny it, but here we have DNA certified 100% proof that it was your, whatever inside the victim or on the victim or whatever the hell, and we know for certainty that you did it, so sign this confession or we're going to make sure you die in the electric chair. And then people sign a confession, and the cops are confused as how they wrongfully convict people of crimes. So how is this legal, I guess, is my question.
I don't know. It really boggles my mind because it seems like cops can lie to you with impunity. But if you lie to the police or you obfuscate the truth, well, that's obstruction or something worse. And we're going to throw the book at you. But we can lie to you, or we can fib, or we can withhold information or manipulate you. That's fine. But, in this instance, the lie was incredibly complex. There was a bogus piece of paper proving a fabricated DNA test, included a seal and letterhead from the state agency. The AG's office said in two instances, the documents included the signature of a fictitious employee from the department. And in at least one instance, a forged report was presented to a court as evidence, the AG's office said. This is egregious. Could you imagine what kind of conceit would it take for someone to create a fictitious employee of the state testing agency and to fabricate letterhead,
right,
just to lie to someone?
Right. And of course, this isn't happening to somebody who has a lawyer, right? So this isn't happening to somebody who's wealthy and who could fight back against it. Also, the person who definitely falls for this or who ends up confessing after something like this is something they didn't do, is maybe somebody that would be like an alcoholic, a drug user, something like that. They've blacked out before. And so then they're thinking in their head, well, I would never do something like that. I would never do something like that, but maybe I blacked out once and did something absolutely crazy and I don't remember it, but I don't know where I was at that time. And they're saying they got my DNA, so I might as well just confess. Or, imagine like your dumbest friend, and not like, the guy who's like happy-go-lucky and not super sharp, but like, like the really kind of slow kid that may really be confused and be like, well, if they got me, they got me. Like and just admit to a crime because, as far as they know, CSI is true. And when the cops bring you the documents that says we got your DNA, that means you did it. And I can't imagine how terrible of a person you have to be to dupe somebody with this.
I think certain investigators, or you'd be surprised the amount of power that will go to someone's head, even if it's very small. And I don't know if I've mentioned on the show, but I just recently started my own law practice. And as a part of it, I'm taking public defender cases. And I have audio of interrogations that happen in a burglary case, right? And the tactics that the investigators use and the lakes that they go through to intimidate a suspect, saying, oh, when we talked last, you lied to me because I went and I talked to these people and they're saying this about you. And I'm going to have this piece of paper and I'm going to go down to the DA's office. And if you don't cooperate with me right now, I'm going to have you charged with this and this and this. And frankly, it's disgusting that a mature adult would want to talk like that to another human being.
Yeah.
But these are the kind of tactics that they use. I mean, this happens every single day, and people are not educated enough in school to know what their rights are. And they're promised things, and these are lies that investigators will say is that, oh, it's really going to help you out if you just help us out, and if you tell us what happened, you're going to feel good about it, but it will also help you in your case. So they say things like that. Just
Yep.
watch the first 48.
Yeah. And just a couple, I guess, more things on that. I've read cases they went as far as telling people fictitiously that their own mother thought they did it. And so, I mean, I can't imagine, kids who are really dependent and have like a codependent relationship on their mother to hear, we're talking about kids a lot of times they'll do this it's not people who are over 30, it's people who are more involved in violent crimes, and that's typically like 16 to 26, 27, 28, like that age range where like a lot of the young men are like engaged in this kind of crime. So that's who they're picking up here. This isn't people again who are like 40-year-old business professionals or anything who have lawyers and who could piece out what's going on here and the lies or everything like that. So never believe what the cops tell you if they're accusing you of something. It could be a complete, absolute fabrication with no sense of truth at all whatsoever.
What you really need to do is to just unequivocally invoke your right to speak to an attorney and insist on speaking to an attorney. There is never any, well, it might have happened once or twice, but 99 times out of 100, talking to the police is not going to get you anywhere. It can only hurt you. And just before we move on, one comment is that, think about the last time that you talked to a salesperson or the last time that you tried to buy a car or something like that. Some people are good at playing hardball, but think about how hard it is for the average person to even like get a word in edgewise or to avoid being manipulated by a good car salesman. Now think about being a 14-year-old kid or an 17-year-old kid being with experienced professionals where you're in a situation where your life could be ruined forever and how scared and terrified you are. It's a whole nother level.
I mean, one time I went to a car dealership and the guy was such a good salesman, I left because I felt like he was going to sell me something I didn't need. But too, I'm sure like what a lot of times happens in police departments is like this detective gets known as the guy who cracks the criminals. And so, then that's his reputation. That's who he is. So he goes in there not looking to get the truth, looking to get the confession because that's what he does.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I'm sure that's a part of it. Now, what kind of recourse would you have? Is there any, I'm sure qualified immunity covers the prosecution and the police for going along and lying about this, but maybe like, I mean, it's from the taxpayers, but maybe if this happens to you, you could get some money from the state. I mean, if you really thought you committed a murder that you didn't commit, that would have to be a lot of mental anguish to go through. Also, just screwing with a person's psychology to a level that, the police are going to present a false document of DNA testing from the AG to you. I mean, what level of the matrix do you feel like you're living in when your life could be manipulated by the authorities to that point? That's absolutely insane.
Yeah, I'd have to brush up on my civil claims and how you could get past the qualified immunity. I would think, if they're doing something that's outrageous or shocks the conscience or is outside of how they were trained to do it, going into like use of force kind of stuff, is it reasonable given their training? But I mean, the prospects, first of all, you have to prove the damages. After you get through the legal shield that they have, you got to prove your damages. And I don't know, maybe a malicious prosecution or something, just spitballing, but.
And so just one more question here. So like, let's say somebody, an officer bullies somebody into giving a confession, right, with false statements. Now in court, can you like ask the officer or the detective what questions they asked to get the statement? And then would the officer either have to disclose or perjure himself on the false information given? And I don't know what kind of impacts that could have on the trial, but maybe, I don't know if that happens or anything. I'm just curious if that's something you can ask in a trial.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what those statements are, but my inclination is that this would probably be solved in a pretrial motion to suppress a confession because those things exist. So usually you're fighting about what evidence will come into the trial before the trial even happens. And so, if something is egregious or if a confession is coerced, you can make a motion before trial and argue that motion, where I'm sure that the defense attorney and the prosecution will extensively play snippets from the interview. And if it's a big case, it will be, even if it's a small case, it'll probably be on camera or audio recorded.
Okay. All right. I'd just be interested to see what happens. Like if a cop like did have to like, so where'd you get this letter? Would they have to like disclose they fabricated it, or would they somehow be protected in whatever kind of cop legal mumbo jumbo to just continue to lie to the court the same way they lied to the person accused?
Well, think about it this way, Kyle. I mean, usually you, as a defense attorney at the trial level, how would you even know that this letter was manufactured? I mean, it depends on a case-by-case basis, but how would you even know? Are you an attorney that's motivated enough to find out? Are you a public defender who's getting paid I guess you'd be salaried, but if you're a private, the rate is $70 an hour, which is 200% less than the private attorney charges per hour. So you're not getting paid much to do this.
Yeah.
And how would you figure that out unless, you were being diligent, very diligent, or if it just turns out that it wasn't true, you get a private test or something like that.
Yeah, you can maybe imagine the scenario where like the defense attorney happens to like, it's a small enough town that they know who the forensic analysts are, and so they don't recognize the name or the signature or something like that. Maybe you Google the name, but even then, I'm sure like most cities don't like have all their forensic analysts listed online or anything. So I don't know exactly how you would. That's a great question. I guess all right, so not to stay on this for too long, but would that be potentially exculpatory evidence if that was withheld from the defense, if they found out later that the confession was given on that ground? I mean, I guess in my mind, that would be obviously the case, right? Like if you found that out later, that would instantly be, we're throwing out the trial and doing a new trial because it's all based on this confession, which is obviously potentially fabricated. But so, just curious on that.
Yeah, well, it depends on what is the physical evidence of it, because, when I send a discovery demand to a prosecutor, I'm listing a bunch of things that I want, but there probably isn't any letter or anything that says, we lied and made up this thing. You just get the letter itself. Now, I'm thinking maybe you could subpoena the analyst who supposedly signed the letter.
Yeah.
And if you're doing your due diligence, maybe you do a Daubert hearing to challenge their credentials. And then maybe if you do the Daubert challenge, which is, when you challenge that someone is an expert and can testify as an expert, that's called the Daubert challenge. But you could do the Daubert challenge and bring this technician in front of the court and, whoops, there is no such person. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. That would all be really interesting. I guess so. Imagine like a scenario where, let's say like 5 years ago, you represented this guy, right? And then you found out today that the prosecutor had used a fake letter in a different case. Could you then maybe look into it and like, if you found that it was a fake letter, that would probably be evidence that you could like bring forward to maybe get an appeal or new trial or something?
Yeah, definitely. But a part of the standard is, and I'm reaching a little bit here, but generally you have to prove that it would have made a difference.
Yeah.
And in most cases, no, because once you're convicted, there's like if this is the slope and you get convicted at the top, then there's a backslide and you have to like, you're working against it. You're working against the tide.
Yeah.
And the standard all changes and the burden shifts.
Yep. There's several cases that are pretty popularly known, like the Adnan Syed, I think that's the Serial podcast and HBO documentary kid, where, there's obviously, if there was another trial, it's pretty coin flip which way it would go, right? And so you would think that would mean, okay, we'll do an appeal because new evidence has come forward that definitely like makes you ask some questions. But because because a panel of judges has ruled, it's, not likely in their interpretation enough to overturn the results of the trial, then, they're not even going to have a trial. And so that's absurd, right? That's an absurd, you're no longer, they're not even considering like reasonable doubt. They're just saying like, if it's unlikely now to be true, then no.
Right. And if you look through it in the legalese lens, it's like once there is a trial and you're convicted, all of the assumptions about presumption of innocence are gone, and it's not like once we find something, we're going to go back to that point in time, beforehand where you had that presumption of innocence.
Right. Yep, absolutely. Okay, Pat, I want to talk to you about this traffic cams thing, but I don't think it's as important as the other story. I just wanted to mention to people, there's this good article in ProPublica that goes on to the that all basically I think what happened is that Chicago put all the traffic cams in predominantly poor, and that means black and brown neighborhoods, and then now more black and brown people are getting tickets from the traffic cams, and they build these things as being race neutral and everything because it's a camera, not a cop, right? But it's just stealing a whole bunch of money from the poor residents of the city and all that, because they put the cameras in low income communities. But they note in here that the federal infrastructure bill that passed is going to allow cities and states to spend federal tax dollars on traffic cameras. So I'm guessing we're going to see a lot more traffic cameras coming up soon. And I could go on a whole hour long spiel about how terrible these things are and how they actually kill people. But